Many thanks to all our friends on the Five. Welcome to Hannity. This is a Fox News alert. The radical, destroy Trump media is unhinged. They're having a collective emotional breakdown. Why? The president didn't say everything they want the way they want it said about Charlottesville. They are twisting, they are distorting, they are taking the president's words out of context. And tonight, we're going to do something they don't do. We will lay out all the facts and tell you the truth about what is really going on in a very divided America tonight. And that's tonight's opening monologue. All right, what the Destroy Trump media is now doing is beyond malpractice. The Destroy Trump media has now worked themselves into a frenzy over the president's comments about the chaos in Charlottesville. Here's what the president said yesterday. Take a look.
I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
Now, as the president did Monday, as he did yesterday, the president condemned now over and over again the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, other hate groups, but he also laid out some of the facts about what happened. Here are the facts. Nobody wants to tell you. All right, here's the video from Saturday. Everybody agrees these white supremacists, you know what? They evoke a natural rage in people. And the people who provoked everything were them, the white supremacists. They are, without question, the most responsible in things that happen here. And every decent, good American should unequivocally oppose everything they stand for. But there is violence. What the president said is true. That came from both sides. Now, that is clear from the video that you're watching. Now, what seemed to set the media off yesterday is that the president said there was violence on both sides. Whether we like it or not, this is an important point. The First Amendment does protect even hate speech. It's why even the ACLU defended these white supremacists and their right to say what they want to say, whether or not we like it or not. You are not allowed in America under the rule of law to get into fistfights, to punch people, engage in fighting because you don't like what they say. Now, despite those facts, the media is living in an alternative universe. Why? Because all they want to do is destroy the president. Now, watch this insanity.
Why is President Trump showing sympathy for white nationalists and other hate groups? One editorial board of a big paper this morning calling the president America's bigot-in-chief.
He's now given safe harbor to Nazis, to white supremacists. He's so disgraced, not just the Republican Party, but the country.
Donald Trump, short of only maybe Woodrow Wilson and Andrew Jackson, is being himself more than any other previous president with disgraceful racial views. That's the truth. He's not pandering to people. These are his views.
I think people now realize that this strain of white nationalism in the White House is, in fact, something that is more closely associated with the president himself.
Barack Obama was a black president. Maybe he didn't think that Barack Obama was fit to be in office. He traded on racial animus and racial BS, and he's been doing it for decades. Anyone who is in that White House and who is supporting him is complicit in their racism as well.
It was disturbing, John. I think we saw the president's true colors today, and I'm not sure they were red, white, and blue.
We can surely say his words have absolutely emboldened white supremacists.
You know, it's a tough night. I think for normal people, you got a lot of people at home going through Kleenex right now. I'm just hurt. I'm sitting here hurt. And I think a lot of people are hurt tonight.
That's the guy that said a white lash. Now, you got to understand something that's going on here. This is very, very important because last week, it was the media. They wanted to convince you last week that President Trump was a madman who wanted to go to war with North Korea. In case you've forgotten, take a look at the tape.
It just doesn't help when our allies in the countries in the region can't tell whether it's Donald Trump or Kim Jong-un who's the crazier one.
This is not the kind of language that we normally hear from a U.S. president during a moment of crisis.
It's not, Jake. In fact, it sounds like something you'd hear from the North Korean state news agency, the KCNA.
What you need to do is lower the temperature and not increase the temperature. And in a way, I think you could say that he's playing right into Kim's hands.
If you read a paragraph in the beginning of a newspaper that said this, a bellicose, threatening, immature, emotionally immature, insecure leader did X, a year ago, would you have thought the President of the United States was that person, or would you have thought the head of North Korea was that person?
Now, the ideological media in this country is creating a massive information crisis for the American people. Last week, the president is unhinged, a lunatic. This week, he's a bigot. And did you notice, by the way, anyone in America, did you notice he scored a massive victory? His peace through strength policies actually worked. Did you notice that North Korea had actually backed down from their threat to fire missiles at Guam? This dishonesty from the media is beyond despicable. It's so unfair for the American people. They are doing you a great disservice. Now, Charlottesville is only the latest perfect example. And let me remind the media, President Trump has denounced again and again in the strongest terms possible, as he should, these white supremacists. He tweeted out on Saturday, "We all must be united and condemn all that hate stands for. There's no place for this kind of violence in America. Let's come together as one." He also went on to say, "We must remember this truth. No matter our color, creed, religion, or political party, we are all Americans first." And on Saturday, the president went further and said this.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
But all weekend long, the lying media, they were trying to convince their viewers that President Trump was somehow sympathetic to these white supremacists because he didn't mention them all by name. So on Monday, the president addressed it again. He mentioned them by name, condemned them again. Take a look.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
And we played what the president said yesterday, but it's never good enough for a media that has an agenda that's ideological. President Trump, he's been condemning hate, white supremacists, David Duke, for years and years. Now, this is something we're about to show you they will never show you about President Trump. I wonder why. Take a look.
What are your views on the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists?
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. I've been doing it now for 2 weeks. You're probably about the 18th person that's asked me the question. I didn't even know he endorsed me. David Duke endorsed me? Okay. All right. I disavow.
David Duke announced his Senate candidacy, claiming your agenda for his own, or essentially saying, glad that you spoke out.
Are you ready before you ask the question?
Newt Gingrich said every Republican should repudiate this guy no matter what it takes.
And I do. Rebuked. Is that okay? Rebuked.
Rebuked.
Done.
I disavowed him every time I speak to somebody virtually, and, they just keep it going. They keep it going.
How would you characterize in more words than one David Duke?
David Duke is a bad person who I disavowed on numerous occasions over the years. I disavowed him. I disavowed the KKK. I just did the Today Show, and it was the same thing. And I said, how many times do I have to disavow? Do you want me to do it again for the 12th time?
Well, I want to know the record on this.
How many times do I have to reject? I've rejected David Duke. I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. From the time I'm 5 years old, I rejected them.
What do you see as the biggest problem with the Reform Party right now?
Well, you've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party.
Reject, rebuke, condemn, disavow. When it comes to recognizing the violence that took place, and both sides were involved in the fighting, you needed both sides there, the media isn't even reporting the facts and telling you the truth. For example, let's take a look at a headline from the Associated Press and their reporter who was actually on the ground in Charlottesville. This is the AP. View from the street, police stood by as adversaries fought. They're reporting two sides. So the AP agrees with Donald Trump. This reporter saying the police did not do anything as the fighting went on. The ACLU tweeted, quote, "Not sure who provoked first. Both sides were hitting each other at Justice Park before the police arrived." They added, "The guy on the ground is a Unite the Right protester. Those in black and red are Antifa protesters." Now, also, where's the media demanding answers from the Democratic governor, Terry McAuliffe, the Democratic mayor of the city, about why the police did not break up the violence? Why wasn't the National Guard brought in? Hollywood leftists, they're now losing their collective minds. Remember Michael Moore? Watch what he says about all this. Take a close listen.
If you hold down the woman while the rapist is raping her, and you didn't rape her, are you a rapist? I mean, let's just really, let's cut the BS and start speaking honestly.
That's a very powerful and uncomfortable anecdote that you share, and people will think that you're comparing Trump voters to racists. I mean, to rapists.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable, isn't it?
That is uncomfortable.
There's CNN, disgraceful, even for Michael Moore's standards. Next up, Chelsea Handler tweeting, well, it is time for the generals that Trump has appointed to declare him unfit for office, and he is unfit and unstable. This is madness. Chrissy Teigen tweeting, Trump is like actually racist. He isn't saying the wrong thing. He is actually racist and means this. Holy bleep, LOL. What a bleeping. Well, you know what. All right, so then you have Brian Fallon, Hillary Clinton's former campaign spokesperson. He sent out this tweet comparing the Antifa, leftist protesters, to the American heroes who stormed the beaches at Normandy to defeat the Nazis. All these people have now gone off the deep end tonight. We need some calm, we need some facts, we need some truth, and America should speak out against all extremism. Now, this started in January. Remember the Women's March in January? Madonna talking about blowing up the White House. Take a look.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Johnny Depp talking about assassinating the President of the United States of America.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president? I want to clarify, I'm not an actor. I lie for a living.
Just like Donald.
However, it's been a while. And maybe it's time.
Robert De Niro saying he wants to punch President Trump in the face. Take a look.
How dare he say the things he does? Of course I want to punch him in the face.
Right.
And it was only a symbolic thing anyway. It wasn't like I was going to go find and punch him in the face. But he's got to hear it. He's got to hear it. You know, that's what he makes people feel.
These are but a few examples of the many, many, many that we could show you. And we can't forget Shakespeare in the Park. And there's also the image so disturbing, you get the viewer warning every time we show it. And that, of course, Kathy Griffin posing like an ISIS fighter with a bloody severed head of President Trump. And we can't forget about, let's see, threats Snoop Dogg, Marilyn Manson, Mickey Rourke have all made against the President of the United States. These Hollywood liberals, they need to stop feigning their moral outrage because clearly they don't have the high ground when it comes to hateful rhetoric. And also tonight, we need to talk about the Democrats and their rampant history of racism. This is something the Democrats, their allies in the liberal media, they're never going to tell you about either. Every 2 years, every 4 years, they pull out their political ads. They tear the country apart in a pathetic, it's their only playbook, attempt to win votes. They divide Americans. Want the proof? We've got the proof. Take a look.
When you don't vote, you let another church explode. When you don't vote, you allow another cross to burn.
On June 7, 1998, in Texas, my father was killed. He was beaten, chained, and then dragged 3 miles to his death, all because he was black. So when Governor George W. Bush refused to support hate crimes legislation, it was like my father was killed all over again.
This happens, we can predict, every 2 to 4 years. Disgusting, offensive, but it pales in comparison to what the Democrats have tolerated in their own party. Here's something the media won't tell you. Republicans have been the party of Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation. Democrats, what have they been? The party of segregation, the Southern Manifesto. Remember back in 1956, it was Democrats who introduced what was known as that Southern Manifesto. That's a document to resist the Supreme Court decision, Brown versus the Board of Education and the ruling on segregation in schools. Let's see. People like Bill Clinton's mentor, who he praised many times, J. William Fulbright, well, who's been praised throughout his entire career, signed it. It was overwhelmingly signed by Democratic members of Congress. In 1956, according to Politico, only 2 Republicans supported that. Then we go back to the 1960s, passage of the Civil Rights Act in 64, the Voting Rights Act in 65. Same Southern Democrats that tried to stop these historic pieces of legislation from being passed, including filibustering the Civil Rights Act for months. And then there's the actual vote tallies. Let's take a look at the no votes for the Civil Rights Act of 64. 112 Democrats in Congress voted against it, 41 Republicans. And then for the 1965 Voting Rights Act, 78 Democrats in Congress voted against it, 25 Republicans voted no. So I don't understand the Democrats, the media, that's their history. And some people in the Democratic Party today praise those people that were involved in that history. Here's another fact the media is ignoring. George Wallace, one of the most racist, pro-segregationists in history, Democrat for most of his political career. Then there's Democratic senator. Remember the former Klansman? Wasn't in charge that long ago, Robert Byrd. He filibustered the Civil Rights Act for over 14 hours before voting against it. And other well-known Democrats, to vote no, well, let's see. That's Bill Clinton's mentor, J. William Fulbright, and even Al Gore's father, Al Gore Sr. And once again, you would think Democrats would denounce and force those type of people out of their party. But instead, Democrats did the complete opposite, especially when it comes to Robert Byrd, former Klansman, Hillary Clinton. We've got the tape praising him as her mentor after he died. Take a look.
Senator Byrd was a man of surpassing eloquence and nobility. From my first day in the Senate, I sought out his guidance, and he was always generous with his time and his wisdom. I admired his tireless advocacy for his West Virginia constituents. As Secretary of State, I continued to rely on his advice and counsel.
Her mentor, was she giving Robert Byrd a pass? He was in the Klan. Now take a look at what Robert Byrd said to Tony Snow. This was back on Fox News Sunday in just 2001, 16 years ago. Take a look.
White I've seen a lot of white in my time. I'm going to use that word. But we just need to work together to make our country a better country.
Pretty shocking. Former Klansman, would you call someone who says that your mentor like Hillary? Now, this just highlights the Democrats' massive double standard when it comes to race in America and the divide that they are contributing to. They have made race a political wedge issue in this country for decades, and they have used it, sadly, to rip this country apart. Last night, we showed you how President Obama, remember, he'd rushed to judgment, raced to conclusions before any evidence, any facts came out, any testimony came out. In 4 particular high-profile race cases, rushed to judgment. President Obama made it a point to associate himself with groups like Black Lives Matter that chant things like, what do we want dead cops? When do we want them now? Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. President Obama even invited Black Lives Matter to his White House and praised a Black Lives Matter leader, DeRay McKesson, while completely excusing his anti-police remarks. Just take a look at a couple of McKesson's tweets. Quote, "This feared for my life language is perhaps the new execution motto of America's largest gang, the police. Should someone who spews that hatred really have been invited to Obama's White House? Where was the media's outrage then? Let alone he was praised by the president at the time, President Obama. Then there's the issue of leftists destroying public property and tearing down monuments like what we saw happen in Durham, North Carolina this week. The left, they're up in arms over President Trump, asking where America should draw a line when it comes to removing these monuments. Well, now look, people can agree with what they think these statues represent. You can have honest disagreement. They don't have a right to destroy property. They don't have a right to be violent because they disagree with what they stand for. We have a political process for that. And as the president said, let local municipalities decide. Now, if the left is so upset over Confederate monuments, then maybe they should feel the same way about displays that honor racist Democrats, the ones we just told you about. Take a look at this statue. Robert Byrd, the former Klansman, in the West Virginia state capitol. The Democrats now think it needs to be taken down. According to a local West Virginia website, there are at least 56 buildings, bridges, highways, centers, and other places that are named after Robert Byrd. Do they need to be renamed? Do they need to be taken down? Now, there are also highways, statues, other things that are dedicated to people like Al Gore Sr., J. William Fulbright, George Wallace. Now, if the left, members of the media, they're going to lose their collective minds over the latest attack against President Trump, I think it's important to remember this, in many ways, is selective moral outrage. And more importantly, at the end of the day, a huge distraction. This last election was about the forgotten men and women in this country. People on poverty, people on food stamps, and people that cannot find a job. As all these fights go on and all the undermining of the president continues, none of those people are being helped. That is a huge, huge shame for the American people. When we come back, Herman Cain will react to my opening monologue, and then later tonight, Larry Elder, Geraldo Rivera. Welcome back to Hannity, and joining us now with reaction to my opening monologue tonight, Fox News contributor Herman Cain is back with us. All right, I'm sorry. This is a serious topic. I don't like to see my country in turmoil like this. I can't stand these white supremacist people. And I know the natural reaction people have to it, because I have it. But you can't punch them. And then I don't like the way the media with the double standard against the president. I mean, he said it Saturday, he said it Monday, he said it Tuesday, and look at how they're reacting.
Yes. Sean, I want to applaud you and your staff for isolating the voices of hypocrisy. That's what that was. I applaud you for that. But let me add something. They couldn't make Russia, Russia, Russia stick. They couldn't make refugees stick. So now their desperate attempt is racism, racism, racism. But here's what they don't understand. The American people are not stupid. Those people that are supporting Donald Trump because of the results he is getting and he is trying to get are not going to persuade Trump supporters to move over to the dark side. They have not just crossed the line, they've gone over the cliff. And the only people that are going over the cliff with them are those people that are just as deceived and deranged as they are. That's what this is all about. It's their desperate attempt to try and get people to follow them off the cliff.
That's the sad part of it, because so many Americans, I mean, 50 million poverty, 50 million food stamps, 94 now, we're at 95 out of the labor force. So there's real suffering in the country. The agenda is being stopped. But there is this history of the left. There is this history. How does Hillary Clinton get away with Robert Byrd is my mentor, or Bill J. William Fulbright is my mentor? Nothing. You never hear of it.
The way she gets away with it is that the liberal media is an accomplice to this TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. Now, I'm not exaggerating, but what you showed is exactly what are the symptoms of Trump Derangement Syndrome. They are never going to get over it. They are still stuck in Hillary should have won. She should not have won because she was not the best candidate. They're stuck in Trump Derangement Syndrome. And I got to tell you, Sean, we will find a cure to cancer before they get over their obsession with TDS. It's sad, it's unfortunate, and it doesn't help this country. But that's what they are trying to do, is to destroy and divide this nation with all of this racist rhetoric that they are continuing to put out there.
Herman Cain, every 2 and 4 years, I showed the ads. That card is played every 2 to 4 years, and I've got so much more that I can play. And I'm watching what they're doing to the president. He condemned these hateful groups, white supremacists, as he rightly should. But they don't listen to that part. Do you think the American people see this?
Yes. Remember, like you, I'm on the radio 5 days a week. I hear from people. They are not stupid. They see past this. The only ones that are following this racist rhetoric and this racist indication of what they think defines America are the people who are already predisposed to their position. Here's what they don't understand. Violence does not define America. Violence does not define who we are. They don't understand that. The liberal media believe that if they say it often enough, over and over and over, that more people are going to fall into their camp. But that simply is not happening.
We've got to get to the business of helping the American people, the economy, keeping us safe.
Yes.
Herman Cain, always good to see you, my friend. 999. Those are answers. 999. They work. Coming up, in the wake of the tragedy in Charlottesville, pressure mounting for cities, towns to remove Confederate statues. Larry Elder, Geraldo Rivera weigh in next as we continue.
Good evening and live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. Hundreds of counter-demonstrators holding a candlelight vigil in Charlottesville, Virginia tonight. The demonstrators sang protest songs from the 60s. The vigil turned into a march around the campus of the University of Virginia. The vigil coming just days after violence at a white nationalist protest left one person dead and more than a dozen injured. Earlier today, the dead woman, Heather Heyer, was remembered at a memorial service. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard and the Honolulu Fire Department conducting search operations well into the night. They're looking for 5 soldiers missing from an Army helicopter that crashed off the coast of Oahu late Tuesday. The missing chopper was conducting a nighttime training mission with another Black Hawk. So far, only parts of a fuselage and a helmet have been found. I'm Jackie Ibanez. Now back to Hannity for all of your headlines. Log on to foxnews.com.
You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. No, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? I do love him. Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue.
That was President Trump yesterday addressing the removal of historical monuments in America. And last night, under the cover of darkness, Baltimore removed 4 Confederate monuments. In addition to Baltimore, this morning, New York took down 2 plaques from a church property in Brooklyn, New York, that honored the General Robert E. Lee. And several other cities are also discussing removing various Confederate symbols, including the governor of New York, all of them. Here with reaction, radio talk show host Larry Elder, Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. You know, Geraldo, I'm not trying to make this controversial because the president even said, okay, it's up to local cities, municipalities, what they want to do. But Hillary Clinton's on tape saying that Robert Byrd is her mentor. Bill Clinton's mentor was J. William Fulbright, segregationist, as you know. Now, they have, all over West Virginia, all they have is Robert Byrd School, Robert Byrd Building, Robert Byrd Street, Robert Byrd. Where does it end? And do you think that this is just going to keep going?
You know, Sean, I think that there are 2 separate issues. On the remaking of history, the renaming, the erasing of history, I think that that is very, very dangerous, and it threatens to undermine the very foundations of our nation. For example, there has been slavery, a scar on the face of society since the ancient Egyptians 3,100 years BC. Then the Romans, the Greeks, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson as the president, and you both referenced. I think that it's very, very dangerous when you start trying to bring, historical figures and monuments and mementos up to contemporary political standards. Very dangerous, very much susceptible to political correctness. But that is a separate issue from the failure to denounce neo-Nazis. Those are two different issues. The president made a grievous error in failing to denounce immediately the neo-Nazis. The second point, the larger point, the substance
but the president
of what the demonstrations
did it, but in fairness, Geraldo, I have tapes of him doing it throughout the years. David Duke, white supremacist, throughout the years. He said it so many times during the campaign. You remember it became an issue. He said he wanted to wait. Now, Obama made a big mistake because Obama, politicized 4 high-profile racial issues and was wrong on all 4. So my question is this. So when the president did denounce it again and again, and he sent out the tweets on Saturday, he said it on Monday, he said it yesterday, at what point is enough, does that satisfy the need to say, I hate these people? And by the way, they're disgusting people.
You have to say that our friend, the president, and we want him to succeed, and now he is embattled even by people like McConnell and others in his own party. He needs not to take advice from whoever gave him that advice. I don't know if it was Steve Bannon, but it was terrible advice. He should have condemned the neo-Nazis. They stink. There's no such thing as a good neo-Nazi. They really are punks. Get them out of here.
Let me get to Larry. Larry?
Wow. Look, Geraldo was talking about what the major story here is. The major story here is whether racism remains a major problem in America and whether or not Charlottesville represents that. David Duke ran for governor of Louisiana in 1991, was shunned by the local Republicans. They supported his opponent, a Democrat and a crook. The RNC refused to give him any support. George Herbert Walker Bush, the president, referred to David Duke as a Holocaust denier and a racist. Duke goes on to lose the race by 1 million votes, then a record. I think it's still a record. He runs for office 4 more times, Sean, loses every time, goes to jail for bank fraud and tax evasion, and in 2017, who are we talking about? David Duke. If it weren't for cable TV digging him up every 2 years or 4 years, he'd be working road construction in Kalamazoo under an assumed name. The real story right now is the fact that in Charlottesville, a black man is police chief. One of the CEOs who resigned from the president's commission is a black man CEO of Merck, and a black man named Larry Elder has a nationally syndicated radio show talking to you about it. And Obama's and Trump's predecessor for 8 years was a black man named Barack Obama. That's the story of America in 2017, not David Duke. Come on.
All right, stay right there. We'll take a break. We'll come back. More Larry Elder, Geraldo Rivera, right after the break as we continue.
We cannot, and in no way can we accept or apologize for racism, bigotry, hatred, violence, and those kind of things that too often arise in our country.
All right, that was the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, earlier today during a speech in Miami on the issue of sanctuary cities, taking a moment to discuss the violent weekend in Charlottesville and emphasizing there is no place in this country for racism, bigotry, hatred, white supremacy, violence. We continue with Larry Elder, Geraldo Rivera. Larry, one of the big issues, and we've looked at the tape, all of us, that the media said, the president was right. Listen, we all despise these people. They are ignorant, they are hate-filled, they're horrible human beings. We all understand that.
Right.
And even the ACLU said they have a right to say horrible things, but there were people that were fighting and punching on both sides.
That's right. That's right. They were fighting on both sides, which is what Donald Trump meant when he said, I abhor the violence on both sides. He was talking about the people fighting in the streets. He was not saying that the people who are white supremacists are equal to the people who don't like white supremacists, for crying out loud. That was so incredibly unfair. And, Sean, 20 years ago, Time and CNN did a poll asking black teenagers whether racism was a major problem. They said yes, but then they asked whether it was a major problem in their own lives. 90% of them said no. In fact, black teenagers said failure to take advantage of available opportunities was a bigger problem than racism. We ought to be talking about that. We ought to be talking about the breakdown of the black family. That is a far bigger problem than the dwindling significance of racism in America.
And Geraldo, when you look at the way the media covered it, they were like saying, oh my gosh, Donald Trump just justified what happened here. He did not do that.
No, he did not. But I tell you, Sean, what if it was a gang of pedophiles against a gang of Boy Scouts, and they both had shields and clubs? You wouldn't be rooting for them or saying both sides were responsible.
Nobody's rooting for anybody.
There's no moral equivalent between the far left, and I think there is an alt-left, if you want me to get into that, and the neo-Nazis.
Yes, I do.
Neo-Nazis and KKK, these hate mongers.
We all agree on this.
We agree. They have no place in any college campus, but there is no doubting the fact, when you're going back all the way to Seattle back in the 90s when they had the G20 riots, there is a group on the far left whose job it is to disrupt, to perpetrate anarchy. And I'm not saying that that's who was involved in Charlottesville. I don't know that for a fact. But in a general sense, you saw them on Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C. I was there. You saw them breaking into stores, ripping the facades off the stores, breaking the windows and so forth. I think that is a problem that needs to be recognized. But that is separate and aside from the KKK, the hate mongers.
Is Black Lives Matter that says we want dead cops, is that part of the alt-left that you're calling?
You know, I think that Black Lives Matter is much more ambiguous and much more difficult to define. There are good people within Black Lives Matter.
What do we want, dead cops? Would you be a part of a group that said, what do you want, dead cops? When do you want them now? You wouldn't be a part of that.
I think that's a fraction of it, and I don't want to get into defending Black Lives Matter, but I think that there is, definitely, you can define far left fascists.
Larry.
Who are terrible people.
I think we should be denouncing all bigots, whether they're David Duke or whether they're Al Sharpton or whether they're Maxine Waters or whether they're Ashley Judd. Can we all agree on that?
I disagree. When you combine Al Sharpton with David Duke, you muddy the waters. The morality.
No, I don't. Al Sharpton. No, I don't.
Al Sharpton may be a lot of things, and he may be a hustler and all the rest of it, but he does not condone the enslavement of a race of people. Larry, you of all people should recognize that there is a difference.
Al Sharpton referred to Jews. Al Sharpton referred to Jews as diamond merchants, referred to whites as interlopers, called the mayor of New York, David Deacon, an N-word whore. I could talk about Freddie's Fashion Mart. I could talk about the Crown Heights. You
may not, with intellectual honesty, compare Al Sharpton to David Duke. You may not.
I said he's a bigot.
That's like Al Sharpton
is a bigot. David Duke is a bigger one. David Duke is a bigger one, but Al Sharpton is one too, right, Geraldo?
Al Sharpton does not advocate violence against white people or Jews and all the rest.
I said bigot. You can be a bigot and not advocate violence, can't you?
I think that when you get into that argument, you give an opportunity to people who have a broader, more insidious motive.
I think there's a bigger case for Sharpton.
I could keep you guys on for a whole hour, but I got to run.
There's a bigger case for Sharpton.
I'm just sorry, we're out of time. When we come back, Greg Jarrett, Deneen Borelli react to the left's outrage over the president's remarks and the abusively biased press. That's next. Welcome back to Hannity. Joining us now, Fox News anchor, attorney Greg Jarrett, Fox News contributor Deneen Borelli. Good to see you both. Greg, you were on last night, and we have a brain room at Fox. If you like looking to get things, facts confirmed and figures, etc. You did some investigating. What did you find?
Well, we went back about 30 years, and we compiled a list of all similar incidents where white supremacists, KKK, neo-Nazis held protests and clashed with counter-protesters ending in bloodshed. And what we found was no sitting president at the time specifically condemned those acts. Now, maybe it happened, but we couldn't find it. We used 3 different search engines, and there's no evidence of that. So what it tells me is that this president, President Trump, was actually the very first individual to come out and condemn in a very strong statement on Saturday. I'm looking at it here. Hatred, bigotry, and violence, no place in America, regardless of color, creed, or religion, should be subjected to it. So I wonder, has the media now superimposed a brand new standard on this president? And if he doesn't hew to the exact language that they demand, then they condemn him for it. If that's the case, it seems patently unfair.
Deneen, your reaction to that?
Well, I totally agree with Greg. And listen, Sean, with President Trump, there is nothing he can do to win in any situation. He just can't win no matter what he says, no matter what he does. And really what's happening is that he is fighting a three-front war. He's fighting the liberal media that takes his words and twists them around. He's fighting Democrats that refuse to work with him. And he's fighting the never-Trumpers who are trying to prove that they were right in the very beginning about everything negative that they said about the president. So he's fighting this front. Yes.
Add the deep state and add weak Republicans. He's fighting them too.
No, you're absolutely right. And so the events that happened in Charlottesville, listen, my thoughts and prayers are with those who were killed and the individuals who are injured. But it's sad times today that we're seeing our country so divided the way that it is.
And, you know, Sean, if I may just add, I just wrote a column about this. It didn't have to happen. The city of Charlottesville knew that violence would ensue. They went to a federal judge, and they asked for an order from him, allowing them to put it in a different location a mile away, a larger venue where they could better protect the citizens and keep the protesters apart. They presented evidence in the form of affidavits that some of the protesters would be armed and that bloodshed would occur. This judge, his name is Glenn Conrad, a federal judge, would have none of it. He called that evidence speculative, and he refused to move the location. Had he taken the evidence more seriously, the bloodshed may not have occurred. Heather Heyer might be alive today.
Last word, Denise.
Well, I just hope folks will pray for our country, and I hope individuals are not afraid to talk about this issue. There are people who are afraid to voice their opinions and support for the president. I hope they don't back down from the left's intimidation.
All right. Thank you both. And I agree with you. This country needs to be brought together. Thank you both.
Thanks, Sean.
We have more Hannity right after